The wind that morning carried dust and sorrow alike, whispering through the empty boards of the old Briar Hollow auction yard. Sunlight slanted over hats and shoulders, cutting sharp through the haze while men leaned on fences trading coins and judgments. Horses snorted, ropes creaked, and somewhere a lonely harmonica bled through the noise, its tune thin as thread. Elias McGraw stood at the far edge of the pen, coat collar turned up against the wind. He hadn't come to buy anything. He hadn't come for company either. Some habits, like showing up where life once mattered, die slower than they should. His ranch sundown waited miles out, quiet as an unmarked grave. The world had shrunk since his wife died. His voice rarely left his throat, and the walls had begun to echo her name back at him. The auctioneer's voice rose and fell. Names, numbers, and laughter. Then amid the crowd's noise, Elias caught a soft sound, a frightened breath. He turned. In the last pen, half hidden behind a wagon wheel, stood a wild foal, small and shaking, ribs visible, its coat matted with dust. Its eyes, black and wide, were not the eyes of an animal surrendering to fear. They were the eyes of something that still believed in a fight it didn't understand. Men around him jeered. Too young to work. Won't last the week. Barely worth the rope it's tied with. The auctioneer laughed with them, tapping his stick against the gate. Start the bidding at $5. Silence. Then Elias, surprising even himself, said quietly, $2. The crowd broke into low chuckles. Old McGraw's lost his mind, someone muttered. The gavel struck anyway. Sold. The word echoed louder than the laughter. Elias walked to the pen. The foal flinched when he reached out a hand. Its skin quivered like wind through tall grass. For a moment, they stared at each other, two creatures too stubborn to quit, too tired to run. He led it home beneath a pale sky. The road back to Sundown Ranch was long and lonesome, cutting through brittle hills and fields where the grass had forgotten how to grow. The ranch appeared like a ghost's memory, fences sagging, the barn roof bowed. In the window of the house, the sun caught the frame of his wife's portrait. Dust had settled on her smile, and for a moment he imagined her watching him lead the foal through the gate, amused, perhaps a little proud. Inside the barn, the air smelled of hay and rust. He laid fresh straw, filled a bucket, then crouched down beside the animal. Don't reckon you got a name, he said softly. Guess neither do I anymore. The foal blinked, trembling. You'll eat when you're ready, he whispered. You're safe here, little one. Then quieter still, almost to himself. Maybe I needed to hear that too. That night, thunder rolled far off. Elias sat on the porch with his pipe, watching lightning crawl over the horizon. Somewhere in the distance, the foal cried, a thin, wild sound. He closed his eyes and listened. By morning, the town had already started talking. At Lillian's general store, Ruthie May was in rare form. Bought himself a dying horse, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. $2. Can you imagine? Man's gone mad since his wife passed. A few laughed, shaking their heads. Clara Bell, polishing the counter near the window, said quietly, Maybe it's not madness. Maybe he just saw something worth saving. Ruthie snorted. You can't save what's already half dead. Clara didn't argue. Her eyes drifted out the window toward the far hills where Elias's ranch lay, a lonely shadow against the morning sky. Outside, Sheriff Dalton Rourke adjusted his hat, hearing the talk. Some folks can't tell when to let go, he said, not unkindly. That's the kind that gets hurt twice. Clara kept her gaze steady. Or they're the kind that don't give up easy. Back on the ranch, days blurred. The foal refused food, stumbling weakly across the pen. Elias tried coaxing, singing low songs his wife used to hum. But the creature only stared past him, as if still trapped in another place. He started calling it Ash, because of the dust-colored streak in its mane. The name fit too well. On the fourth night, a storm rolled in fierce and sudden, rain like bullets, thunder shaking the walls. Elias woke to a crash, the sound of splintering wood. He grabbed his lantern, rushed to the paddock, and found the gate half broken. The foal collapsed in the mud. Lightning flashed, painting the world white for an instant. The foal's sides heaved shallowly. Elias dropped to his knees, covering it with his coat. Don't you go, he said through the rain. Not after I said you were safe. His voice cracked. I've buried enough souls on this land. I won't bury yours. He stayed there until dawn, rain running down his face. The world washed in gray. When sunlight finally broke through, the foal stirred weakly, breath steadying. For the first time in months, Elias laughed, soft and startled, like a man remembering joy by accident. A few days later, Clara Belle rode up to the ranch. Her mare's hooves crunched softly on the gravel path. She carried a small sack of feed and a tin of salve. "Heard you got yourself company," she said. Elias was fixing the fence, sleeves rolled up, hands rough with work. "Company that bites and kicks," he said, smiling faintly. "Guess I deserve that." Clara dismounted, brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "You always talk this way to your guests?" "Only the ones that stick around." Inside the barn, Ash stood uneasily. Clara approached slow, her movements gentle as wind over wheat. She offered her palm. The foal sniffed, then leaned forward to nuzzle the oats from her hand. Elias watched, quiet. Something in his chest loosened, the kind of ache that doesn't hurt but reminds you you're alive. Clara looked up. "He's starting to trust." "Guess it's contagious," he murmured. She smiled. Small, true. Caring don't ask permission. Their eyes met, holding that fragile space between them where two broken stories almost made sense. When she left, the sun was sinking. Elias stood by the barn, watching her ride into the lavender dusk. Her silhouette wove through the tall grass until she disappeared, leaving only dust and the smell of clover. Weeks passed. The ranch began to breathe again. Elias fixed the fences, mended the roof, cleaned the stalls. Each dawn, Ash grew stronger, faster, his mane brightening in the sunlight. Sometimes Elias would stand at the gate and watch him run, wild, proud, unbroken. But there was something else in the horse's movements, something not quite ordinary. When Ash galloped across the fields, the wind seemed to follow. Dust spiraled behind him like smoke, and the old fences rattled as though remembering storms long gone. Elias couldn't explain it. He didn't try. He only knew that when the horse ran, his own heart did too, like it hadn't in years. At night, under the pale light of a half-moon, he'd sit on the porch, pipe in hand, listening to the distant thunder of hooves across the field. Sometimes he swore he could hear laughter in it, the kind that belonged to someone he'd loved and lost. And though he didn't yet know it, the foal he'd bought out of pity was carrying a story far older and far more miraculous than either of them could have imagined. The morning broke clear after a week of rain. Dew clung to the prairie grass and the world smelled clean again, like forgiveness. Elias saddled his horse and rode out with Ash trotting free beside him, the young colt taller now, stronger, his mane rippling like smoke in the sun. There was grace in every movement, but something mysterious too, something that didn't quite belong to this world of dust and fences. One day, while brushing the stallion's neck, Elias noticed an old scar beneath the mane, a faint burned shape almost like a brand. He rubbed the dirt away and saw the letter S curled through a broken ring. It looked familiar, though the memory came to him like a whisper through fog. Later, at the livery, he asked Clara about it. She froze for a long moment. "That's the mark of Silver Rock Ranch," she said quietly. "It burned down years ago. Lightning struck the hayloft. They said every horse in that bloodline died in the fire." Elias frowned, tracing the edge of the brand in his mind. "What happened to the mare?" Clara's gaze softened. "They said she ran back into the fire for her foal. No one ever found them." The world seemed to tilt, a strange stillness filling his chest. He looked out the window toward the horizon where Ash was running in the pasture, mane silvered by the morning light. "Guess that foal found his way home," Elias whispered. Clara smiled sadly. "Maybe some souls just don't let go." The weeks that followed brought gossip again, but this time the tone had changed. When Elias rode Ash into town for supplies, folks stepped aside to watch. Old Ruthie May, who once called him a fool, whispered now with wide eyes, "That's the silver blood colt. Worth a fortune, that one. Man didn't buy a ghost, he bought a legend." Elias only tipped his hat, but pride stirred in his chest, quiet and clean. Sheriff Rourke stopped him outside the saloon. "You could sell him, McGraw. Breeder from Nevada's offering near 1,000. Elias looked at the sheriff, steady and calm. Some things ain't meant to be owned twice. Rourke studied him, then nodded once, understanding the weight behind those words. Elias had once been owned too, by grief, by silence. Not anymore. The rancher rode out of town as the sun lowered behind him, the colt's shadow stretching long beside his own. The summer fair arrived, a day of dust, laughter, and the sweet smell of roasting corn. Farmers from across the valley came to prove their worth, to show off their stock and their skill. Ben Turner, the farmhand's boy, tugged at Elias's sleeve. "You should enter Ash in the trial, sir. Show them what he can do." Elias hesitated, glancing at the crowd. "Ain't sure he's ready." "Maybe you ain't either," Clara said softly beside him. She wore a pale dress and a look that made him braver. So he entered. The challenge was a wild course through Copper Canyon, sharp turns, narrow ridges, and a river crossing at the end. As Elias mounted, Ash tossed his head, nostrils flaring. He was restless but not afraid. The starting pistol cracked through the air. They shot forward like thunder breaking loose. The crowd roared behind them. Elias leaned low, his heart keeping pace with Ash's hooves. Dust filled his lungs. Sunlight flickered through canyon walls, and for a moment, the world shrank to breath and rhythm, the living heartbeat of man and beast moving as one. Halfway through the race, a sudden sound shattered the air, a rifle crack echoing from the ridge. Then the mountainside groaned. Rocks tumbled, dirt exploding upward. Screams rose from the crowd below. A child, Ben Turner, was caught near the canyon's edge, frozen in fear as boulders thundered down toward him. Without command, Ash turned, bolting toward the chaos, mane whipping like firelight. Elias barely held on as the stallion darted through the falling debris, hooves skimming over loose stone. Dust blinded him, but Ash did not falter. The horse reared and kicked aside a rolling boulder, then pressed forward. Elias leapt from the saddle, dragging Ben into his arms, shielding the boy as the last of the rock slide came down behind them. Silence fell, just wind and the soft whimper of a child. When the dust cleared, Ash stood trembling, blood streaking his flank, breath steaming in the cool air. He turned his head toward Elias and Ben, alive. The crowd began to cheer. Elias knelt beside the stallion, pressing his forehead to that warm neck. "You remembered, didn't you?" he murmured. "You remembered the fire." And in Ash's dark eyes, Elias saw it, the reflection of another life, a burning barn, a mother's silhouette vanishing into flame. The secret was never about bloodlines or luck. It was about memory, the kind that survives pain, the kind that passes between souls. The foal he'd bought out of pity had carried not only survival but the will to save, something Elias had long forgotten how to do. That night, Clara came to the barn. Ash lay resting in the straw, bandaged and calm. She knelt beside Elias, her fingers brushing his hand. "You saved that boy like you were saving yourself," she whispered. He looked at her, eyes soft and weary. Maybe we all needed saving. For a moment, neither moved. The lantern light trembled between them, catching motes of dust that danced like tiny golden spirits. Her hand stayed on his, steady, unhurried. Words would have ruined it. Some connections bloom better in silence. Outside, the wind carried the scent of rain. Days turned to months. The ranch healed just as its owner did. Grass grew green again where it once lay dead. Foals played in the paddock, their laughter carried by the wind. Elias and Clara worked side by side, two lives mended quietly by routine and grace. At dusk, they'd walk the fence line together, sometimes speaking, sometimes not. Ash ran free across the open fields, mane glinting silver under the sun. He had become the heart of Sundown Ranch, a living reminder that broken things could burn and rise again. Years later, when Ben Turner had grown into a man, he would tell the story to his children. His voice would soften when he reached the ending. They say the rancher bought that wild foal out of pity. But that's not the truth. He bought him out of mercy, and mercy's a thing that always finds its way home. Sometimes the souls we save, well, they end up saving us right back. And maybe somewhere in that wide western dusk, where the wind still hums through the wheat, you'll hear hooves in the distance, steady, strong, alive. So if ever life hands you something broken, don't turn away. Look closer. Maybe it isn't ruin at all, maybe it's resurrection in disguise.